First of all, I'd just like to let everyone know that I'm calling in from Wadandi country, which is in the southwest of WA. And I'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous owners of the Wadandi land where I'm calling from and pay my respect to the elders past, present and emerging. And if anyone would like to share what country they're calling from, please feel free to chuck it in the chat function. So look, today is all about really focusing on adoption-driven agri-food innovations. And as part of that, we're going to talk a bit about what AgriFutures is doing in this space, explain a bit about the startup network, which hopefully you've all heard about. And also then we've got a really fantastic panel lineup. And we've got Matthew, Michael and Fernando on the line who will be joining us for that as well. So I've got to say my name is Tash Teakle. I'm the Managing Director for AgriStart. We're based in Western Australia and we started about 5 years ago really to see, I guess, how we could support the agtech ecosystem in Western Australia. And as part of that, we started the first agtech accelerator program in WA called Harvey, which has run 4 times over the last 5 years and hopefully be running again later this year and yeah, in the lead up to Evoke Ag next year. So I guess just a little bit of Zoom etiquette before I pass over to John to give us the big picture. If you've got any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat function. I'll try to keep an eye on that as much as I can. Also, you can raise your hand using the Zoom raise your hand function. This is meant to be an interactive session. We're here to answer questions, not too formal, so do feel free to jump in if for some reason I do miss your question. So we've got a reasonable sized group that we can do that, I think, today. So first up, really excited to have John Harvey on the line, the Managing Director for AgriFutures, who most of you probably already know. John's going to give a bit of background, I guess, to AgriFutures' focus on helping startups to really connect to growers and drive agri-food adoption here in Australia. So thanks so much, John, for your time.
Thanks, Tash. Sorry, how long have I got, Tash? I probably should have known.
As long as you need, John.
No.
We'll cut you off after 10, 15 minutes, but yeah, see how you go. We're all excited to hear what AgriFutures is up to. So yeah. Okay.
Hey, look, thanks. And and feel free to interrupt me if you've got questions. I know it's a bit tricky online, but sometimes that's easier to do it that way. So we got interested in the whole agri-tech space as part of that shift when we moved from Rural Industries Research Development Corporation based in Canberra and the move over to Wagga Wagga and the rebrand to AgriFutures Australia. Part of that whole process was really trying to understand our role and how we could add value to Australian agriculture. In the process of doing that, we ran a whole series of regional innovation conversations, and we really focused on talking to emerging leaders. And the key thing out of that was when we spoke to emerging leaders, there's a whole range of very, very different expectations and aspirations for Australian agriculture. Amazingly passionate about the future of agriculture and wanting to be a part of it, and very optimistic, but wanted to do it differently, I think, to the previous generation, including what I've grown up with. And 50% of the people we spoke to mentioned an interest in agri-tech, wanted to be a founder, wanted to be an investor, or wanted to be a customer of an agri-tech product. And that really, I hadn't heard that so strongly until we went around and talked to these emerging leaders. So very interested in the technology, the machine learning, artificial intelligence, sensors, Internet of Things, 3D printing, but also very interested in the business model and having control over your destiny. So a lot of frustration around succession planning, but a realization that you don't necessarily have to own the family farm to have a really vibrant future and career in agriculture and to make a contribution. And I think we saw a lot of, we spoke to a lot of people who were saying, I just want to have that control over my destiny, and being involved in a startup probably gives me that. So we sort of came from there, went away and said, well, how can we help in AgriFutures? And that's where that sort of led us down the track to running Evoke Ag twice. And that was really came out of traveling around the world and looking at what was happening in agri-tech around the world, and just realizing how fast it was moving and how insular we were from that, what was happening. And a lot of the things that I saw when I went to New York or San Francisco and Europe and UK and Israel, I wasn't seeing here in Australia anywhere near to the degree that was happening over in those countries. And so part of Evoke was really to try and, or shine a spotlight on what we were doing here in Australia, but also for people in Australia to hear some of the stories about what was happening in other parts of the world. So that was the driver. And then of course we've gone now one step further with GrowAg, where we've got an online platform where people can see the commercial opportunities. So for me, the whole driver here is if we're going to have a vibrant agri-food sector, we need a vibrant agri-food innovation sector. If our farmers are going to get access to the best technologies in the world, well, we need a really vibrant agri-food tech sector here in Australia. There's some real competitive advantages that we've got. And one of them is just that we've got such a variety of different production ecosystems. We've got tropical, subtropical, right through to Mediterranean environments that we can test technologies out. We've got very smart farmers. We've got great researchers. So the bit which we probably struggle with is the commercialization, is the actual how do you take it to market. And part of that is, in my view, is been the fact that when we've looked at taking products to market commercially, we've typically focused on the Australian market, and it's small. It's 2% of the world's market. So we've focused on, of the 100%, we're focusing on 2%. And in a lot of cases, I think really good technology, when you do the numbers, it just doesn't make sense if you're only targeting 2% of the world market. So changing that mindset and really looking more as a critical part of our farmers getting access to technology is also taking it to the rest of the world. It's got to be part of our strategy, I think, if that technology is actually going to get commercialized. There's just a couple of other things, and then I think I'll pause, but this interaction with farmers is critical. I've heard a lot of people say, it's not actually, and this came out of Evoke too, don't worry about raising capital. Find yourself some customers. You get customers, the capital will follow. And the amount of times I heard that at Evoke was bloody crazy. And the amount of people that weren't actually looking at getting customers, but were actually focused on trying to raise capital was also pretty crazy in hindsight. So there's definitely something in that. How do you, if you can get customers, the capital will flow. And I think that obviously that's quite challenging. And what we're seeing at the moment, this is my view, I'll just tell you what I think, but I've seen a lot of, like demonstration farms where people go and throw their bit of technology on a demonstration farm and everyone looks at it and says, that looks great. I don't think that farmers are going to buy that. I don't think they're going to be able to tell whether it's a tool or a toy from that sort of, chuck it on a bit of a farm and see if it works. I think what we probably need to do more of is starting to really monitor the business impact of some of these technologies. So, and then the example I like to use is there was some work done, and it was a Chinese example, but they did a bit of work where they got 2 strawberry farms. One strawberry farm, they just said, keep farming conventionally. On the other strawberry farm, they said, use all the technology you can throw at it, artificial intelligence, machine learning, sensors. And the experiment really was just to monitor the two. And then for the first little while, the artificial intelligence digital ag treatment actually didn't do as well as the conventional. It actually dipped down quite significantly. But within 18 months, they were producing 194% more strawberries, and the investment in the technology had a return on investment of 70%. Now, farmers will listen to that. So to me, that's the next challenge, is how do we start getting these technologies tested in real environments and collect that sort of data so that farmers can look at it and say, this is a no-brainer. I need to do this. And I think that's what's going to actually start driving or help startups to get their customer base. So I don't know, that's maybe hopefully Tash, some thought starters. I might just pause there and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks, John. Look, I find it really interesting, that gap that you talk about around commercialisation. We all know, Australia's fantastic at R&D, and, that so-called valley of death, it's just so real. And, I do find investors, particularly in Western Australia, they're very mining sector focused. So trying to, I guess, encourage that early stage investment in ag tech to encourage, I guess, investors to get people over that valley of death and help to scale and get the commercialization we need, help them to go to global markets. I'm not sure if you've got any thoughts about what we can do more in that space to support commercialization.
So Michael, this is something I learned from you, so I'm going to steal your thunder, but the expectations around agri-tech startups being a bit slower, a bit longer, taking a bit longer, and possibly growing to a size of 1.5, 150, 200 mil is a different expectation to, say, fintech or medtech or some of the other techs. And I don't know that the investors I don't know if that's been picked up yet. I don't know if that's well known. I don't know if that's actually built into the system. I think there is still expectations based on some of those other areas about what returns you might get from ag tech. Now, the returns are great, but they just take a little bit longer. So there's probably some education to go in our investors in that particular area. There's also definitely a role for government here, which is not actually happening at the moment. So there is a need for, I think, some very patient capital or some co-funding from government to help get some of those organisations through that valley of death.
And look, one of the things government is doing, and that's one of the hats I also wear, is around the Accelerating Commercialisation Fund, but it's a very narrow window and it's a very difficult program for businesses to get into. So potentially if there's something specific in the ag tech sector that is patient capital, that's a great opportunity hopefully for government in the future to support as well. But I wonder also, John, you touched on, demonstration farms. I loved what you said about it. Farmers can't tell if it's a tool or a toy. I'm going to steal that quote. I like that one. But really trying to, I guess, encourage that more one-on-one interaction between growers and startups so that, they are getting that early customer feedback, and hopefully then that might de-risk it a bit for investors as well. Do you think, startups that are partnering closely and doing, one-on-one engagement and trials with farmers rather than just, showing up at a field day or a demonstration site, do you think they're more likely to overcome some of those commercialization hurdles?
So from previous life when I was in GRDC, now we've got a fabulous network of grower groups right across Australia, particularly in the grains industry, and I'm sure they exist in other sectors. This is what they're really good at. We're actually just put out a tender recently looking at supporting some grower groups to explore their technology strategies as a group. So look at what's out there as a group and decide what they're going to trial as a group. And it takes the social risk out of it. So they can actually say, these are the three we think could best go. And you try that one, I'll try this, somebody else tries the other one. But that discussion and that social support and that, I think the grower groups have a huge role to play in validating and testing and promoting the technologies that actually make money, but as opposed to the ones which, you might get flogged on a one-on-one discussion by the protagonist. So yeah, probably underutilized yet. We're certainly looking at trying to explore, to partner with some of those grower groups to get them looking and trialing not just individuals, but probably more packages of technology that help them solve a business problem or improve their productivity. But very focused on measuring the improvement in productivity as a consequence.
No, I completely agree. Grower groups are definitely a fantastic resource, and I know for, you know, my own experience, it's a really great introduction that we can make for ag tech startups, is to get them connected in with grower groups. And I think GRDC, I'm almost on the Western panel for GRDC, it's something that they try to do as well, is really help fund that R&D through grower groups, because they are on the ground, they've got multiple growers connected in. So it's a fantastic resource that we need to get our agri-food startups connected in more with. So I'll just see if anyone else has got any questions. I did say I was going to check the chat function. I keep forgetting.
Yeah, hi Tash, Pete Whittle, I've got my hand up. Can I
jump in?
Yeah, sure. Look, what John just said there about the alternatives of looking for customers or looking for capital is the absolute core issue for us as a startup. And I'm absolutely delighted to hear it spoken so plainly. And I'm not sure that everybody understands the impact that has on us as a startup. It's such a central issue, and us being able to identify really what it is the problem is, so that we can frame our solution to it and move towards product market fit. It really has been a huge issue for us in sort of developing as a bootstrapping startup and reaching the point where we have got the confidence in our own product to be able to sell it confidently and gain the confidence of either an investor or a pioneering partner. I mean, the farmers who might join up with us to test a product and stay the course until we've developed a solution are really the people out on the bleeding edge of innovation, even though we think what we're doing isn't particularly, I mean, it's innovative, but it's not sort of, you know, shooting for Mars. So I just was really happy to hear John say that so clearly, and I hope that it has been heard and will be expressed more. Huge issue.
Just maybe just one last comment. I think that Pete, the other thing on that is it's time consuming and it's expensive, and I think that's the difference. I think that is different for ag tech, that interacting with farmers and testing the technology in the field across seasons means that it's going to take a bit longer than maybe fintech, medtech. Means that it's the capital that goes in's probably got to be a little bit more patient. So Michael, it's back to what you said to me the other day. It's, you know, like our expectations around ag tech just need to probably be tempered a bit, I think, on, well, for the investor point of view. But having said that, I do think there's no doubt, you know, the long-term returns are there for those people that are prepared to be a bit more patient.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it's really the onus still on, you know, the startups themselves to be able to communicate their value proposition, you know, clearly to their customers and to investors. That's something that's really critical, I see as well.
Well, Tash, communicating it is one thing, but actually understanding it and knowing it, we can't really be sure we know it. I mean, you can have, if you've got a whole lot of brass, you can say, yeah, this is what we do, and go out there and people look at you and go, it's not even a problem. And you've got to do a heck of a lot of exploration and pivoting before you actually find something that people want in sufficient numbers to turn it into a commercial opportunity.
Of course, the value proposition has to be validated with your customer, or else if we don't know we're solving a problem that a customer actually has, then it's, yeah, not necessarily one that's worth solving. So good point, Pete.
Tash, just one thing before you move on. Another issue I want to raise is just the work we're doing with GrowAg, because I think it's really important. We spend in Australia, we're spending at the moment about, if you look across the 15 RDCs, we're spending something like $1.1 billion on innovation, research, development, marketing, whatever have you. When we spend that, generally we get dollar for dollar from whoever we're spending it with. So, you know, the latest numbers are over $3 billion going into R&D each year. So what's really, really important is that people can see the outcomes, can see what is actually being delivered from that investment. And that's where GrowAg comes into play, because there are products and services that could be built on the back of some of that innovation. And what we're trying to do with GrowAg is package it up so it's easy to see and it's transparent. But to me, this is absolutely a critical, we do a lot of research, it's well-resourced. Everybody needs to be able to see the outcome and then have an opportunity to potentially participate in commercializing it. So I'm reasonably passionate about also how do we get the results of that to farmers, to market, to the world. And there is, in my view, for a lot of it, there are commercial solutions, and startups and SMEs and corporates may well be the vehicle for delivering that. So connecting them up with those research findings is really, really important.
Yeah. Very true. And I know a lot of farmers, they are feeling quite overwhelmed with everything that's out there, and GrowAg, can provide that sort of one-stop shop almost. It's a fantastic resource. So it's really good to see that coming together. Okay. Right. Have we got any other questions for John? Do feel free to just take your mute off and jump in. They're being kind to you on a Friday, John.
Yeah.
I can ask one. Norton here from Lyra Robotics. I find it really interesting that the notion of seeking capital versus customers, and I completely agree with the seeking out customers and validating your product market fit as being extremely important. And we've found great stuff from doing that. But we're a deep tech company commercializing university made technology into the agriculture sector in hardware, which takes a pretty substantial amount of upfront capital, patient capital, I guess, as well. But it seems that the VC market in Australia is looking for revenue at the very minimum in the ag tech sector before they'll give you a look in. And so we're calling this between this rock and a hard place, where we have customers who are saying, we want your technology when it's available. And we can probably sign them up to say they'll buy that technology when we have it ready. But they also want to see it working in a farm, which requires the upfront capital to get the tech out there. So how would you recommend navigating that kind of rock and a hard place between giving the VCs what they want in terms of revenue, but also making sure you're not burning customers by putting a product out there that simply doesn't work yet to the level that they need?
So, this is probably, Matthew, this is probably a really good question for you rather than me. I'll just make one comment, because when I look at what Swarm Farm have done, I look at what Swarm Farm have done with their autonomous vehicles, and the way they've been able to do both is really impressive. Like the way they've been able to develop with farmers in the paddock, but still keep the technology going is, to me, is just a bit of idea of how it can be done. But Matthew, you're probably much better positioned to answer that one.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Thanks, John, and cheers, Norton. It's a really good question. I think the answer there is understanding the difference between revenue and clear demonstration of product market fit. Sometimes there is confusion around that point, and also it's a bit of a matching of style. Venture investing, and I mean, maybe it goes a bit to the scope of today's conversation. Venture investing is a particular kind of investing. It's certainly not the only kind, and it's also true that for a lot of startups, VC may not be the right path, or may not be the right path initially. So sometimes when you get a question about revenue of that kind, what the real question is we want to see demonstration that you've got scalable product market fit. Now, Tenacious's answer would be a lot more on we'd be wanting to see the evidence of the scalable product market fit. Revenue is normally a bad and often trailing indicator of that. But sometimes those two things get kind of merged together, or the quick, or sometimes easy question is tell me about revenue, tell me about ARR or whatever like that. But I think the things you want to focus on are you seeking your capital from the right sources? And I totally get that you often feel like you're wedged between a rock and a hard place, because on the one hand, you've got customers kicking down the door and that's money, but you can't quite get at that money. I think the reason why that's sometimes a blocker in the venture path is the one way we've come up with to describe this is the difference between an awareness problem versus a comparison problem. And that is that sometimes we see early stage companies who are doing well with customers, but largely because the customers they're talking to are only just starting to understand there are different ways to do what they want to do. And that company is the first one that they've come into contact with. Because we're a sector specialist investor, we obviously know what's going on here and internationally. And so for us, we might see that company isn't particularly well differentiated. But to them, it would feel like a conundrum of, wait on, I've got these customers wanting to pay me money, but I can't get an investor to invest in me. And I think that's the root cause of the problem, is that it's because a venture style investor is looking for a globally scalable investment opportunity. And it's really the fact that you need to demonstrate more that you've got a differentiated and scalable kind of product market fit. You obviously won't have that all together as an early stage company, but some of the core elements, it's a part of the innovation or part of the business model or those sorts of things. Revenue can be a lazy way to try and assess that. But really, a deeper look can find that evidence lots of other places. Obviously, talking directly to early customers, even if they're not paying, is one of the good ways. But that can sometimes be an explanation for why you kind of feel that, just stuck in that sort of unsolvable puzzle. Hopefully that was a helpful answer. It was a bit of a rant. My apologies.
No, thank you very much, Matthew. That helps a lot, and it'll be good to start to get some of those tangible things. Just a quick add-on question to that one: would something like a pre-sale signed document or something like that be enough evidence? Because we've obviously heard like sometimes an LOI, which is non-legally binding, for instance, is a good start, but moving towards something that requires some form of commitment from a customer but doesn't necessarily need to be financial. Would you recommend something along those lines?
Yeah, so that's a good example. The way we often say it is, show me the ways that customers are making commitments, expending resources, right? Because if they're expending resources, you've clearly identified a pain that they want to take away. Now, it may be that they're dedicating staff time. It may be that they're setting aside productive land. The way that that's represented can take a lot of different forms. And importantly, in fact, sometimes startups get almost fooled into prematurely optimizing for revenue. I would much rather see, a large organization set aside, a significant part of productive land, which had production risk attached to it, than, entered into some, weird sort of contractual relationship. Because if things don't work out, the contract's worth nothing anyway. But if they're prepared to commit and they're putting their own staff time and their productive land and production risk and all that kind of stuff, they clearly see something that has potential. Now, they may not expect to get to that potential for 3 years. I would focus on that kind of stuff. Demonstration of ways that you're clearly solving a pain for them, as demonstrated by the amount of resource they're prepared to further explore your solution.
Great, thank you very much for that.
I was going to say, Fernando also wants to jump in. So
sorry, just echoing a few of Matthew's comments and Norton. As an active investors ourselves, we don't overly focus on revenue. Of course, as Matthew mentioned, revenues are lazy and pretty an easy way of demonstrating customer traction. So if you can demonstrate that, yeah, great, brilliant. But that's not the only one. And we will basically, during our due diligence process, we will gather the information that gives us conviction that your customers or your potential customers really like your product and willing to pay for it. It doesn't necessarily need to be demonstrated revenue. Actually, we've got a situation now where we you know, we've got a startup that's overly focusing on revenue, and we just said, look, don't worry about revenue right now. Just, you know, look at getting your product right and demonstrate that you've got a growth strategy, a growth pattern that is going to take you where you want to be. So look, maybe VCs that not AgTech specific, maybe they might focus a lot more on revenue. I think for you know, I guess Tenacious and GrainInnovate are probably the only two Australian AgTech exclusive funds right now, and we will look at a lot more than revenue. So I don't know if you've spoken to us, not to me personally, but maybe to the Artesian guys. But in those conversations, we'll talk about a lot more than just revenue. And look, with a balance of, you know, when do you raise money and revenue versus equity funding. Number one reason why startups fail is poor market fit. Number two is running out of money. So clearly that's that's a, you know, it's a strategy that you need to get right as you're growing up your business. But as Matthew mentioned, it's not one strategy that works for everyone. It will be specific to your business, you know. And as you said before, some startups require a lot more capital to get traction. And you know, in our portfolio, we've got companies which we have to be quite patient, and some others which have grown quite rapidly and generated revenue. So, you know, we'll look at all of them.
Thanks.
Great, thank you so much for that. I'm sure some of you may have talked to my co-founder, Yuxi, but it's good to hear it myself as well. We'll endeavour to kind of meet those things. That's really good information. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Norton. Now we've got Chris Bass, who's also wanting to ask a question of John related back to demonstrations and partnering with farmers. Chris, do you want to take your mute off and ask a question?
Thanks, Tash. I don't know if you can hear me. The question is, what's the go-to partnership collaboration model with the growers and farmers? Often the time, it's not knowing where the technology might, whether the technology is available or not available. But often it's also the farmers and the growers are busy with the business as opposed to looking at and reflecting on the business. So how do you make time and partner with farmers? Is it through incentive structures? Is it through a tech transfer hub? How do you get their attention?
It's a good question. I mean, I'll just tell you what our approach is, and I'm not sure if that's helpful, but we were sort of turning it around the other way and going straight to the farmer groups and giving that, actually investing with the grower groups, and saying to them, now you sort out where you what you develop your technology strategy as a group. What are the parts of your business where you reckon technology can play? And when as they start working their way through that process, then they will start asking questions. And that's at that point, we're hoping to be able to provide them with access to resources. You know, it might be the Ag Tech Finder, that Food Agility put together, or it might be something else, so that they can start then narrowing down, and then I guess almost the opposite, approaching startups that they think might be useful to them. So that's the approach we're taking. The grower groups are really used to working together. They've been around for a long time now. They're savvy. They're also, most of them have got some resources. They've got an executive officer. It mightn't be full time, but almost, I guess what we're trying to do is empower the grower groups to start and challenging them to actually start developing up a tech strategy that for their members, and then let them approach the startups. So Chris, it's probably slightly the reverse to what I think you're suggesting, or where you're coming from.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Chris. We might move on. I've just chucked in the chat line. We'll talk a bit more about this later, but if you want to know more about, I guess, from a grower's perspective around partnering with startups, we are running another public webinar on next Friday at the same time. So I do recommend jumping onto that. But we might just now jump back to a bit more about the startup network, and hopefully Dallas has been able to connect back in. So Dallas is a program manager at AgriFutures. He's been doing a wonderful job pulling together a whole range of programs at AgriFutures. So thank you, you, John, for providing that great context. And yeah, we'll get Dallas to tell us a little bit about the program if she's on the line. If not, I'll jump in and tell a bit more.
No, Tash, I managed to score it on the computer because mine was going to blow up. So I just wanted to give a bit of a background on the Startup Network program. It's definitely a new program that will live under our startup program banner at Evoke Ag. So we're predominantly at Evoke Ag, we've really focused on showcasing startups at the Evoke Ag event and really getting them to kind of pitch to customers or really showcase their technologies to customers and also connect them to investors through the investor dinner. But through some feedback with the startups, we've heard that they really kind of want to connect to farmers directly. So this program was kind of born out of that. We're really focusing on connecting founders who've got a product that is going to solve farmers' challenges and get them in a room directly with farmers and farmers specifically that are looking to take that next step with getting new technologies on their farm. So this is a really great opportunity for startups to kind of get feedback from farmers, and we're specifically looking for startups who have a product that they're ready to trial on farm and try and, you know, strike up that partnership with a startup and a farmer. And this is something that's, I mean, we're based in regional New South Wales in Wagga, and Zetify, a really successful startup, is also based here. And they've kind of, this was kind of a bit of an inspiration. They've got a farm here in Wagga that they do trials on. And it's a really great partnership, and that's kind of what we're looking to achieve from this program. So down to the nitty gritty, applications are currently open for that program, and you can find them on the Evoke Ag website. And they close at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on the 17th of May. So why apply? Tasha might get you to jump in here just to give a bit of a background on the mentorship and the online panel sessions that our startups will get to hear from. You're on mute, Tash.
Always the way. Can't do a whole Zoom meeting without at least one blooper. So yeah, look, thanks so much, Dallas. It's a great program that AgriFutures is supporting, and I think the opportunity from the startups that I've talked to actually, you know, meet face to face in Wagga Wagga is a great opportunity. But what's a key feature about this program? And look, there's so many fantastic programs already happening around Australia. We've got Farmers to Founders, Rocket Seeder, SproutX, Cicada. Of course, I've got to say Harvest, but you know, there's so many great programs already out there. And the difference with this one is really around trying to not replace the startup alley that we have at Evoke Ag, but try and keep some of that momentum going, and really about connecting the growers and the startups. That's really, I guess, the key difference for this sort of short-term project, to really kick off that relationship between the mentors who will be the growers with our early stage agri-food startups. So I guess they get, you know, that mentoring from a grower. They get the opportunity to attend exclusive masterclasses, which will be held virtually across Australia. They get additional one-on-one support for pitch training. And then the really exciting bit is, of course, being able to go to the event in Wagga Wagga, where they'll not just have the pitch event, which is combined with some other fantastic AgriFutures initiatives, but will also include some more startup pitch training, media training, and the agri-food adoption workshops. So it's a really great opportunity. And I guess for those businesses that are in the early stages, they want to grow their network across Australia, I think that's a really great opportunity for them. So it's great that AgriFutures, I guess, is providing this, you know, little carrot to dangle to get everyone together. And I think we're talking early on the line, you might have been off, Dallas, but we're all a bit, you know, bummed about Evoke Ag not happening this year, and really looking forward to it happening next year. And hopefully this will be a way to bring everyone together.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most exciting part for us is having that face-to-face event. I mean, I just got back from Beef Week yesterday, and just being able to connect to everyone face-to-face. I mean, there's a lot of, in this past 12 months, there was a lot of online pitch programs, which is really great to see that people can pivot and keep that momentum going. But I don't think you can replicate that connection that you get from a face-to-face event. And this will kind of be our first one that we're hosting, and definitely a standalone event from Evoke Ag. So we're excited to, you know, get everyone in the room and yeah, just get that connection and collaboration happening. So talking about the face-to-face event, it's really broken down into 3 components. So one will be the Pitchcraft Workshop. Tash, do you just want to talk about that one?
Yeah, thanks. So we've got this amazing facilitator from Queensland, Daniel Johnson. He's done a lot of pitch training with ventures all around the world, particularly in San Fran, and we're lucky enough to have him based in regional Queensland at the moment, and he'll be coming down to, or doing some online workshops and one-on-one training or mentoring with the participants, plus then running the face-to-face workshop in Wagga Wagga, which is really exciting. So I think a lot of us, you know, it's a skill that we all need to be constantly refining, and it's, you know, really critical one for a lot of startups. And the program that we're running, it's not just about pitching for investors, it's about communicating your value proposition to growers and really building those relationships across the whole ecosystem. So not just about investment pitching.
Yeah, and then we'll also be running another workshop, which is known as the Producer Technology Uptake Workshop. So this is a separate program that AgriFutures is running at the moment. It's a pilot program, and there's one component of it, which is a workshop that we're going to be incorporating into the Startup Network program. And that will be really focused on getting farmers into a room and really unpacking the problems they are having on farm at the moment and what solutions and technology solutions might be out there that they'd be comfortable, you know, taking that next step and adopting. So the startups will get to sit in on that conversation, and this is a really unique opportunity because they get to be there from when the farmers are kind of talking about the problems, and, you know, we've got the technology providers in the room that may have a solution right there, and they can connect and kind of discuss that at that workshop. And then following on that will be the actual pitch and networking dinner. So the pitch itself will be a 5-minute pitch followed by Q&A, pitching to a room full of farmers, agribusiness professionals here in regional New South Wales in Wagga. And it'll be followed by a networking dinner where everyone will get together for one of the first times in 12 months and get to enjoy themselves and connect and hopefully strike up a great partnership. So who are we looking for? We're really looking for those motivated founders who are really eager to connect and broaden their networks across Australia. We're looking for Australian businesses specifically, and they might have, well, they will have a strong value proposition and potential market demand in any diverse agricultural sector, and specifically businesses that have got a product ready to trial on farm and that are looking for feedback. So the entitlements, will be taking up to 10 startups to Wagga, so they'll receive a travel bursary to get here. We're going to have a Growers' Choice Award, so we'll have a grower judging panel at the pitch event, and 3 founders will get a professionally produced pitch video that we'll organise, and that can kind of be tailored to how they'd like, but we'd love to kind of film that on farm, seeing their product like actually being used. And then that's a great resource that they can then take and use in the future, especially for all those programs that do need a pitch video. That'll be a great tool for them to use. They'll also feature in our startup directory. This is a new kind of a component to our website that's really popular. We're getting hundreds of views across it every week. So the startups will feature on there, and we'll also do a lot of PR around the business. So they'll get featured articles, podcasts, and it'll be a great awareness piece for that founder. Now, Tash, did I miss anything?
No, that was great, Dallas. I think, yeah, it's a fantastic opportunity that AgriFutures is providing to startups. And I think it, you know, really complements some of the other accelerator programs around Australia and feeds in nicely to those, as you said, helping provide that video that often they get asked for. So, yeah, fantastic initiative. Thank you. All right. Does anyone have any specific questions about the startup network? We'd obviously love for the people in the ecosystem in the room today to spread the word to your networks. And for the startups that we have on the line, if you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out, or either now, put your hand up and put it in the chat. And I've also got myself and Dallas's details here if you want to reach out to us with any specific questions. So I think we've got another couple of weeks until applications close. So it's not an overly onerous application form. So make sure you allow a bit of time for that. But yeah, it should be something you can, what do you reckon, Dallas? Maybe an hour to fill out the form? It's not too bad.
Yeah, it's not a very long form at all. We've kind of tried to really cut that down and make it really simple and easy to be able to apply.
Yeah. Fantastic. Look, thanks, Dallas, and thanks for all the programs that you run. But
sorry, Tash, there's just a couple of questions in the chat. So Pete, yep, Startup Network Program, you can find it under the Startup tab on the VocAg website. There's also a little tile on the homepage. You can just click straight through it. You'll see it there. Another one, whether the program's targeted to just farm tech or is it also post-farm gate? Definitely, if you've got a product that you think you want to trial and kind of connect in to suppliers, we can definitely allow that and definitely strike up that connections and find those contacts for you. So I'd encourage you to apply as well. And then I'll put that updated link for the webinar for people to register for the startup partnering with farmers into that chat as well.
Yeah, apologies. I think I've put up the wrong one, but I can't find the correct one. So thanks, Dallas. That'd be great. All right. Well, thank you so much. We might just jump ahead now to our panel, since we've got three fantastic speakers on the line, and from the conversation earlier, I think people are looking forward to asking these guys some of the tricky questions, hopefully, as well. Can't let them off too lightly on a Friday. So I really appreciate Matthew Pryor from Tenacious Ventures, Michael Macolino, who's the AgTech lead for BDO, and Fernando Felquer, who runs GrainInnovate for GRDC. Thank you so much for giving up your time today. So we're going to, I guess, hear a little bit about the background for you guys and how you sort of got into this space, and then we will open it up to a bit of Q&A. So yeah, Matthew, did you want to tell us a bit about your background and how you got into the AgTech VC space?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Tash. Wow, what's relevant? I actually spent the majority of my time on the founder side of the table, so I've done a couple of tours in startup land, spent a bunch of time in Silicon Valley with my first startup in the sort of straight tech space. Kind of got to see the inside of the Silicon Valley VC system, which in all of its glory and foibles, including getting acquired by a company that had recently gone public and sort of working for a public company for 2 years after that, a NASDAQ listed public company, which convinced me that I don't want to be part of a NASDAQ listed public company anymore. But all useful experience. Ended up moving back to Australia, as a lot of expat Aussies do, and sort of immediately started comparing what it was like there to what it was like here, and I just really couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't doing enough as John was saying, that the degree to which we were known as an agricultural innovator was out of whack with the amount of innovation we were actually doing. That sort of parlayed into a journey into what would become the agtech market. So pretty early in that, with a company called Observant, that was an early innovator across a whole range of stuff, but largely IoT and on-farm kind of water management. Ended up back in California, in a similar journey, but ultimately in the Central Valley rather than the Silicon Valley, and saw a lot of the US kind of farming system, as well as the emergence of agtech as an investment category there, and got to know a lot of the investors and the emerging system there. And that just reinforced for me all those thoughts about how there was so much opportunity internationally for what Australia was starting to do. I see Emma on the line there, so part of that journey was getting involved in the early days of Rocket Seeder, and then that was kind of, for me, the direct pathway through to a career change, I suppose, into venture. Sarah and Alette and I met and realised we were kind of both wanting the same thing, so I joined Agtenic, and then together we co-created Tenacious Ventures, which at the moment has a single fund, Fund 1, which is $35 million funds under management, has only been investing for a year. We've done 6 investments to date, and looking forward to doing more.
Thanks, Matthew. We'll definitely ask you a few more questions about Tenacious Ventures in a bit. It's a fantastic initiative for Australia. So next, I just love Michael Macolino to jump in and tell us, I guess you've followed a similar path to Matthew, running your own tech company and then creating a new role for yourself as ag tech lead for BDO. So Yeah, tell us how you ended up there, Michael.
Yeah, happy to. And yeah, thank you for having me on the call today. So yeah, I lead AgriFood Tech for BDO, which is an accounting advisory firm. I joined BDO about 3 years ago, but prior to that, I spent 13 years. I built 5 businesses over that time. So I started my first business when I was 21. Effectively, you know, it was a car detailing business, but in the core of that was in the middle of the drought when we couldn't wash cars with tap water. I did be fairly creative. So I actually developed a way of purifying water using reverse osmosis and some other things to essentially get water down to 0 parts per million. So it meant we could actually wash cars and wash boats really effectively and efficiently. And you know, a whole range of different factors. We actually grew that business to a team of 6 people, and that business was actually acquired. So it was kind of weird. I was about 24 years old and I kind of sold this business, and this was way before startups were like kind of a cool thing. And the word founder was, you know, not even something that people spoke about. And I kind of got this bug for building businesses. And, you know, it was for me a way of going, okay, well, how do we use technology to create something? So then I went and worked in property development, and we did some things there. So I was involved in quite a large marina development down in South Australia. So got introduced to raising capital. So we built this $30 million marina in the middle of GFC, which was an interesting experience. But we also incorporated into that a whole bunch of, you know, technologies like, you know, how do people book, you know, their boat into the marina online, which, you know, in 2008, 2009 was a still fairly interesting concept. We had a whole bunch of sensor technology in that marina, which enabled safety, and, you know, just kept on going down this technology rabbit hole. I then built a gym. So before the 24-hour gyms and anytime fitness, I built a gym and incorporated technology into that, so we could automate a whole bunch of the gym management, and you know, sold that. I had a couple of online stores as well, as e-commerce was starting to come on board, and then eventually, you know, basically started, you know, doing some consulting in cloud technology and built a cloud technology company. Doing consulting in the sort of zero cloud market space. And that business was merged into a friends accounting firm. And then we built a proper startup. So we, back in 2015, launched a company which was effectively an Uber for accountants kind of model. We wanted to provide freelance accountants and consultants with technology to run their practice, so they could effectively be sole traders and have all the infrastructure of a big firm like BDO or a KPMG. So we went down the path. We raised in a couple of rounds about just over $1 million. We grew that to a team of about 50 people. We took that to the US, that model. We then, you know, started to grow into the US. We went and did a Series A capital raise, which was about a year-long process. Through that process, I sort of, you know, got to go to the US and pitch to some of the really large VC firms over there. Learned a lot about myself, a lot about the sort of VC world and the startup world, which was back in sort of 2016, 2017, really starting to take shape. And, you know, with family, you know, I had a young family at the time. I thought, you know what, I think I've done this whole building companies thing as far as I kind of want to take it. So I decided to step back from that business. Had about 6 months to consider a bit of a career change and what I wanted to do next. And that's where I started to sort of go, okay, well, I've got this real passion for building companies. I love technology, and I really wanted to find an industry where I could make some impact with that skill set, with my experience and the networks that I'd built. And I'd had some exposure working with Jerleek and also with Yalumba and a couple of other quite large wine producers from my cloud consulting company, and found the people in agriculture and the industry and the challenges really fascinating. So basically spent about a year and a half, you know, going into the role at BDO, just really delving deep into this industry, working with a lot of clients in BDO on more of the agribusiness side. So, you know, getting an understanding of the back end systems that run some of our large agribusiness partners and so forth. And middle of last year, BDO essentially provided me the opportunity to be an associate director within the firm. And I launched the ag tech part of the firm. So what I do now is effectively work with ag tech companies. I've got a role, obviously, within BDO, but also a role with the University of Adelaide as the expert in residence at their Think Lab Ag Tech Incubator. And I work with some really early stage companies through the AgTech incubator. But then as the companies start to get to a point where they've got product market fit, I'll help them to understand what kinds of capital they should be looking to raise, assist them to raise that capital. But the real sweet spot is really when companies do have that capital. From my background building my businesses, I really help them to establish those operating rhythms and really help to scale the business and provide that commercial acumen to what is quite often a very scientific, technical kind of industry. So really enjoying it and looking forward to contributing to today's call.
Great, thanks, Michael. And just from an outsider looking in, it's been great to see, one of the big consulting firms sort of, innovate in this space and actually create this type of role and really making an impact. So yeah, fantastic to see. Now, Fernando, GrainInnovate, this is, again, GRDC, which I love being involved in. GrainInnovate was really a big jump for GRDC to do something quite different in this space. So I'd love to hear a bit about your background and how you got involved in GrainInnovate.
Yeah, thanks, Tash. Michael's a very tough act to follow with that background. Mine is a little bit simpler. Originally a researcher, so I did PhD 20 years ago now, probably, in the sort of biomedical sciences, oncology research, transition to industry after my first postdoc, and started working in that space, mostly the oncology biotech startup space. And I became involved in capital raising, building these businesses and growing internationally. As a I guess an executive manager. For 5 years, I ran a consulting business where basically I advise startups on R&D and fundraising strategies. And during that time, I diversified a little bit outside of oncology. I mean, I love living in Adelaide, and it's a small town, a lot of innovation happening, but probably you gotta look outside of your core business, I guess. So I started working a little bit more in physics and remote sensing, and somehow I landed with agriculture. So I became quite interested in the emerging AgTech space in Australia, and I could see how my experience in I guess the drug development biotech space could be beneficial to the AgTech world, and at the same time I learned about GRDC. I didn't even know what an RDC was before 3.5 or 4 years ago, and at the time they were looking at the better a way of engaging with the emerging AgTech startup ecosystem or companies. So everything I do is for impact. I love to create value. I love to build things. So yeah, I'm up and I came across to GRDC. Big cultural change, I guess, coming from basically running your own business to a relatively large, quite political organization, but I guess at the time already we were thinking on doing things in different ways. And as you mentioned, Tash, GrainInnovate it would have sounded quite unusual for an RDC, 5, 6, 7 years ago, but it was quite natural for us. And I think myself coming and bringing that certainty from other industries and say, look, it's a venture fund, it's what it is, there's nothing crazy about it. We should be doing it. It probably helped get it over the line. So we launched GrainInnovate a couple of years ago to the VOCAG 2019 actually, and it's been great and it's been very positive. So we partnered with Addition to manage these funds. So basically we contribute half of the investment capital each, and Addition managed the fund for us. However, I'm in the investment committee and heavily involved with it. So I actually love it. I was on the other side, raising capital as working for startups. It's great to be on the other side now. It is a lot easier, I'll tell you that. But also I think I bring a perspective of empathy and understanding of what, of what startups need from us. I actually found Artisan's approach very startup friendly. I really enjoy, and we, both Rob Williams and myself, we really enjoy engaging with startups, and really we go into meetings with the attitude of we want to fund you. We want you to convince us that to invest in your idea and your startup. So it is a lot of fun, and it's creating a lot of value for the grains industry as well. Yeah, so that's probably it for now. Thanks,
Fernando. So just on GrainInnovate, it's great to hear that you go into meetings with that mindset of wanting to fund them. And, it's really a bit of a myth that VCs or any sort of investment groups are a real shark tank. I mean, I'm involved in Southwest Angels, and there is that perception that VCs or angel investors are a bit of a shark tank, and it's really not like that. So really great to hear that from GrainInnovate as well. And I guess what I'd also like just to get your thoughts on what's, I guess, the number one thing you're looking for in your investment portfolio.
Yeah, so we have a so GrainInnovate is an investment vehicle for the mine GRDC portfolio in a way. So our investment strategy and investment mandate is aligned with our R&D plan, which is basically innovations that create value to Australian grain growers, not exclusively. So I think I was actually looking at our portfolio, and there's probably one or two that are largely grain specific, or largely only, or 90% grains. I mean, we look at startups that create value across the Australian and international ag space. However, they have to deliver value to Australian grain growers. So that's the mandate sort of fit. And then look, the startup side of things, the venture side of things is like any venture opportunity. You want to see a good team, you want to see good market fit, you want to see a growth path, a growth trajectory, and I think those are the things that Matt can add, but those are the things that every VC will look for. Beyond mandate fit, which is this is the sort of stuff that we strategically are investing on. Everything else is pretty much the same, right? So good team, good ideas, good business plans, and the ability to execute.
Yeah. We might get Matthew to follow on from that. So yeah, with Tenacious Ventures, it was a really exciting opportunity for AgTech VC in Australia. And I guess, yeah, it'd be great to see, a bit of the rationale behind some of your investments, Matthew, and what's sort of the number one thing that you're looking for at Tenacious Ventures?
Yeah, thanks, Tash. Yeah, a couple of different ways. Actually, when John made his intro and was talking about the level of investment in innovation, I think that's a really central point as far as Australia and AgTech VC is concerned. And to Fernando's point about the GrainInnovate mandate, there's an interesting dynamic between the money that's invested in agricultural innovation, which clearly largely comes from grower funded and farmer-funded levy payments that are matched by government. And the policy settings there, historically at least, have been to produce innovation that improves the efficiency of Australian farmers. So the kind of the dynamic comes in when we think about the other thing John said, which is that there are very many more farmers outside of Australia than there are within. And so I think the challenge for us as an industry and as an ecosystem is to continue to deliver on that mandate, but also to look at this massive global opportunity. And it's tough to quantify, but it looks like it's a multi-$100 billion market already, which when we talk about the global market for products, agri-tech products and services. So when we think about the Australian farm gate output having an aspiration of $100 billion, then we could easily match that in a decade or two if we were really resolved to scale up agtech alongside agriculture as two pillars of economic sustainability and viability for Australia. So that's really what Tenacious is looking for. We are an impact investor as well, and we truly believe in the ability of innovation to help transform the global food system, both, you know, to its essential footing of kind of climate resilience and a provider of affordable, nutritious food to a growing population, but also to be a net provider of climate solutions, which is a really exciting area for investment as well. So what that means is, you know, we are an early stage investor. We are largely focused on Australian originated investments, but we do also invest a bit outside of Australia. We will typically be entering at, you know, anywhere from pre-seed to seed to Series A. The hallmarks for us are, in the first instance, you know, we want to see a defensible business model insight and something that has global application. Technology is usually a part of that, but it's not an essential core. Technology tends to be the way that something happens rather than the thing that happens. So, you know, outside of, you know, the kind of things that Fernando already talked about, you know, clearly there's got to be at least the core of a team. Often an early team won't be fully formed, but there's got to be a core of a team, and that team has to have some unique way of, you know, viewing a problem or what they think is the right solution to a problem, some kind of defensible innovation, and that can span everything from, you know, could be sophisticated kind of deep tech in a kind of pre-farm or on-farm production setting. It could be some understanding of how a supply chain is going to be transformed. It could be fully digital. It could be electromechanical and electronic, and, you know, all kinds of combinations there. But ultimately, those two things together need to form the basis of something that has good evidence of product market fit. Doesn't, you know, but we talked about before, there's lots of ways to kind of characterize that, in the hands of, you know, a really committed team with a big vision, and, you know, demonstrates or at least is sort of based on the core of some fundamentally new way of bringing a solution to market such that it's scalable and defensible at scale.
Great. Thanks, Matthew. And look, as wonderful as Tenacious Ventures and GrainInnovate are, we have to also remember, of course, that there's lots of other funding opportunities for early stage startups. So I might get Michael just to touch on some of the other forms of funding that are available as well.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, the first thing to touch on regarding funding, I speak to a lot of companies about funding, particularly when I meet with them at ThinkLab, is funding should really be seen as milestone based. So quite often I'll have companies come to me, they've got a big idea, they've got a big addressable market that they've done some research in, and they're basically going, okay, well, we need $3 million to make this happen. And an exercise that I'll quite often do is I'll write up on a whiteboard, okay, $3 million, please show me how you're going to spend it. And they'll, you know, write product and people and, you know, marketing. And I ask them to keep on drilling down into that. And quite often that exercise, I find that sort of people can't actually spend that $3 million. And what, you know, I will try and sort of go through a process with them is, let's build up from the ground up, not from the top down. So quite often companies will, you know, look at a VC, they'll look at companies that are doing things in their space, they'll look at how much money they raised and sort of try and reverse engineer to where they want to be. I go from the bottom up, and you know, I think finding product market fit is that absolute core foundational milestone that a company needs to achieve. And that's where we need to have a look at, okay, well, what funding do we need to get to that foundational milestone where we have, you know, engagement with the market, we have some maybe early stage customers, we have a functioning prototype, we have all of the components that can demonstrate that this is gone from an idea through conception through to a point where we can actually start to go, okay, well, we can quantify the level of money that we need to get from stage A to stage B, and then we have a fairly good idea of sort of what things look like after that. So, I mean, from my personal business, you know, we raise money from friends and family. You know, we knew that we needed about $200,000 to get to product market fit. We went to our friends and family and effectively found people that would put in $30,000 checks. And that was enough money for us to get going. And I've seen that in some of the startups, you know, in ThinkLab and around the country, is that, you know, from 250,000 to 500,000, a startup should be able to get a fairly significant amount of work done for that if they're smart about their execution. Government grants, particularly in agriculture, are a really effective way of matching that money that might come in from friends and family. So in South Australia, we have the South Australian Research Development and Startup Fund. Effectively, that provides match funding from the government. And that funding is basically to deliver a particular project or technical outcome for that company. We also see many of the, you know, the venture funds, particularly ones in this space like Artesian, who are willing to come in at an early stage and will do that sort of, you know, maybe $250,000 investment as well. So there's all of these different forms of funding that are available from external sources. And really what I'm trying to sort of say to founders is, how do we just keep on sort of, you know, going back as far back as we can to those foundational elements and try and achieve something significant at a product level and at a market level for $500,000 to maybe a maximum of $1 million. And then once we can really show that and demonstrate that to investors, then that makes that conversation of I need $1 million to $3 million that much easier. And I feel that, you know, that's something that we need to just be, you know, much more cognizant about within the ecosystem and communicating that, you know, getting capital in the door doesn't have to be these big flashy rounds that we quite often sort of see in the media.
And I guess on that, if you go too early for those big flashy rounds, then you've got potential dilution issues and down rounds and all that. So it can
yeah, I mean, it's really important to sort of, you know, understand the structure of the cap table and the structure of that valuation. And you know, I've seen founders that have gone from, you know, maybe a couple of accelerators. So they've given away maybe 6% through a couple of accelerators. And then they've spent a huge amount of time to sort of, you know, speak to every investor to try and raise an amount that they're probably never going to be able to raise for their level of their stage of growth. But, you know, if you give away too much too early, even to private investors, I've seen startups have given away, you know, 30 or maybe 40% of their company just to get that initial round of capital in. And they're basically, their backs up against a wall to be able to raise capital at a further stage. So it's really important to have that long-term mindset in terms of how much you have to get away in terms of equity to bring the capital in the door to basically achieve a certain stage of growth and product market fit.
Yeah, great points. Thanks, Michael. I don't know if yourself or if Matthew or Fernando want to jump in, but what are, I guess, some issues around debt funding as well as another alternative funding source? Yeah,
so I might just touch on that. It'd be really good to get Matthew's view and also Fernando's view on this as well. I'm a really big fan of companies bootstrapping as far as they possibly can, particularly in the software space. If they are building software systems, you know, that recurring revenue model can really help to create that basis of you know, foundational revenue. And there are, you know, organizations like Tractor Ventures that are starting to, you know, when a company can get to $50,000 worth of funding of recurring revenue, they can then sort of, you know, essentially apply that debt funding model where they'll give them, I think, 5% of their recurring revenue in a financing stream. And Matthew can probably articulate it probably a bit better than I can in that way. But, you know, there are other sources of financing out there. And really, it's about right-sizing the opportunity that you're trying to go for with the way that you should actually go about building that business. So, you know, having access to capital and being able to align that access to capital with the growth rate that your market is demanding that you take is really important, so that you don't sort of, you know, go up like a rocket ship and then explode because you've gone too fast for the market to be able to adopt. Matthew, maybe can you fill some more details in on terms of that venture debt side of things?
Yeah, cheers, Michael. I mean, yeah, Matter and April at Tractor, I mean, that's an awesome development. And I think, you know, to go back to that discussion we were having before about matching, you know, kind of what you need to the sort of investors that you're talking to. it's not an homogenous group of people. And so I think for founding teams, that's really the first question you need to ask yourselves is, you know, do you properly understand what those investors want in the long-term picture? Because you can end up kind of, you know, on the wrong train, so to speak, and the problems that you end up with will make, you know, ramen salary look attractive again, because it ends up, you know, distracting you really significantly from your mission. And so when people talk about venture style investing, you know, I mean, it's not as fully templated as this, but largely venture investors are looking for very significant multiples on valuation. Eventually, they will need the company to either go public or get bought. And, you know, its benchmark would be, you know, 10 plus times the value at which they entered the company is really a baseline expectation. And so there are all those sort of downstream things that you really need to think about. Just getting money, just getting investment to sort of keep the lights on or do something like that may not actually be the right choice. So I think it is really important. There are lots of alternatives out there. Obviously, you want to do what you can with all of the great, you know, state and federal government schemes that are out there. You know, obviously getting money from customers is preferable in every case where you can do that, as Michael was saying, but also knowing what kind of investors and what their expectations of the journey, because, you know, you most certainly are going into partnership with those people, and you have to treat it in that way, that this is a long-term relationship. And certainly if they're a venture investor, the investment will almost certainly come along with different classes of shares and protective provisions around, you know, how decisions are made in the boardroom and, you know, what happens, you know, what are called drag along and tag along rights. So all sorts of additional things. And it will be really important for you to understand those. You know, no one expects that they will ever be taken, you know, actually used, and they're there, you know, for safety reasons, but they're always there. What perhaps another thing that isn't super well understood is venture investors don't want to hold a majority position of your company either. What venture investors want is a really highly motivated team that's got a big vision and incentive to grow. And nothing, you know, diminishes the incentive of the founding team than just continually getting diluted down to an insignificant shareholding in a company. So it's a real balancing act. But if you've got alignment as a group of founders, and you know where you want to take the company, and you know, if someone said, write on a piece of paper what you think your estate is going to be worth in 5 years' time, you know, that's the most important thing to have agreement on amongst the founding team. When you know answers like that, then you can know, you know, what sort of investors and what sort of investor expectations you could potentially meet, and therefore matching yourself to angels who believe in growth or people who are happy to provide debt financing and expect, you know, you to get to profitability and pay dividends. That's great, a great path to be on. If it matches, if you want to build a massive company and, you know, go the rocket ship path, then great. But understand that they're very different sorts of journeys and very different sorts of investors to take you along.
Great, thanks, Matthew. I've got a heap more questions, but I've just realised the time. I should really open it up to everyone else to have the opportunity to ask questions of our three panellists as well. So if anyone would like to, just take your mic off and ask a question, feel free. This is good. It means I get to ask my question. Excellent.
I can ask a quick one again. I can steal it.
Thanks, Norton.
As investors, in terms of the conversations that we as startup founders have with you, is asking direct questions like what would you need of us in order to have the confidence to invest? Are those sort of direct questions ones that you're okay with, or the ones that, kind of overstep in the market with?
Well, I mean, my quick answer is, you know, you're entering into a relationship, and if a relationship can't be based on candid and open communication, then, you know, it doesn't bode well for the future. So I would say ask as direct questions as you want, and if you have people getting upset or whatever, then I think you're talking to the wrong people.
Can I just build on that as well? I think the point that Matthew's just made about relationships is really, really important and often misunderstood. Startups have quite often been trained through demo days and pitching that it's this sort of very transactional type of game that we're playing. And I've always said to startups, don't go and just pitch and basically, just see an investor and basically just like bombard them with your pitch as if you've got 2 minutes and then you're never going to see them again. If you meet an investor, and I think, what we had this week at SouthStart was a great opportunity to sort of, get founders to connect with investors. It's the start of a relationship and the start of potentially a 10-year relationship or plus. So what I'd always suggest is if you do get that opportunity to meet an investor, just give them a really high-level overview of what you do as a company, but then also start to understand what are their mandates. So, what kind of things are they looking for? What stage of company do they invest in? How big are the checks that they usually write? What kind of milestones do they want the company to have reached before they'll sort of make a decision? And then, just engage with them on an ongoing basis, through social media. There's a lot of them are engaged on Twitter and things like that. Get to know that investor. And ultimately, what you're trying to do is align what you're building and build this opportunity that the profile, almost target persona of the investor that you want, and then be able to basically just say to them, hey, I've seen that you've said some things on Twitter, or, I heard you speak at a conference that you're looking for this. This is one of the things that we're working on. And can we ever sit down and go into a little bit more detail? So I really would encourage founders to go more relationship building with investors rather than just pitching investors, because investors get, literally hundreds of pitches a year. And to really break through that noise, I think comes down to those interpersonal skills of founders.
Yeah, look, I think it's, totally agree with what you said, Michael. You got to be able to have those conversations and ask the questions that you need to ask, and VCs should be able to tell you what is expected from you as well. So look, I think there's a lot of 3-minute pitch or 30 seconds or trying to sell your idea. Yes, great to summarize some of that, but I don't think anyone writes checks on the back of a 3-minute pitch. I mean, it's always a long-term discussion, sometimes over several occasions. You get a bit of info, you come back and you have a chat, and as both Matt and Michael said, it's about building a relationship. Yes, there's a transactional side of it, there's money being exchanged, but you from both sides, you're building a relationship, and that's usually long-term, so it goes over several years. So you have to be able to have the conversation that you need to have, the good ones and the not so good ones with startups and with your investors. So again, I think the approach from most VCs and when I was on the other side as well, fundraising and talking to VCs, it's always been about establishing those relationships. Some of them are nicer than others, and there is a bit of a Shark Tank culture in some circles, but it is all about building relationships. So yeah, just backing up what everybody said. You want to be able to have those conversations, deep conversations with your investors.
Yeah, good point. And I'd just like to add to that, some advice for the startups out there is something that raises a red flag for myself as someone managing accelerator programs and also as a personal investor myself, is startups or founders who aren't willing to take on feedback. And it's not just about accepting the first offer or doing everything your partners tell you to do, but if you're at least willing to consider feedback, means that you're really likely to also be listening to your customers and having that empathy for your customers, being willing to do that validation and to change direction if needed. Then I think that's a really important skill, and investors of all shapes and sizes will be looking for that as well. So being open-minded and willing to take on feedback doesn't mean you have to always accept it, but being open to considering it is really important. Have we got any final questions before we wrap up? All right, I think we probably ended up talking more about the money than working with growers, but that's okay given the fantastic speakers that we had on today. But next week's webinar is going to focus a bit more around, I guess, understanding from the grower's perspective, what is it they're looking for when they're looking to adopt new technologies. So I think Dallas has popped the correct one into the correct link, sorry, into the chat function. Oh, no, I can see a hand up. Rob Kelly, have you got a question?
Sorry, it was just a quick one regarding the grower event that you've got planned. Any rough idea of how many growers you're expecting to be there? Just a good indication of what people should expect to maybe prepare. They're going to present to 5 growers versus 100 growers.
Are you talking about the Wagga Wagga event?
Yeah, sorry, the Wagga Wagga event.
Yeah, so I think it's 150 people it's capped at, Dallas, is that right? You just unmute, Dallas. Oh, her computer might have frozen actually, but Rob, I'm pretty sure Dallas has said before that the event will be about 150 people, and some of that will be AgriFutures staff and also the participants in the program. So we're expecting, yeah, probably I would guess 80 to 90 odd growers in the area that they're trying to attract to that event. So it's definitely going to be a grower focused event. But if Dallas's computer unfreezes, she might be able to correct me on that. Okay, if we don't have any other questions, I will just wrap it up. I'm not sure if John Harvey's on the line anymore, but it was really great to have John give us that sort of opening context. And thank you so much to Fernando, Michael and Matthew for sharing your insights. I think, you know, that funding gap's such a big one for startups, and that's why it was such a focus of the conversation, because it is something that, you know, everyone's interested in. It's a big problem we're trying to solve across the sector, is a bit of that funding gap. So thank you so much for sharing your insights into that. And, you know, we'll be delighted to have you as part of the program for our cohort that gets selected as well. So look, hopefully we'll see some of you on the line next Friday. And just a final reminder, the applications close 5 p.m. on Monday, the 17th of May. It's a really great opportunity that AgriFutures are providing. So make sure you spread the word, and got any questions about applying, don't hesitate to get in touch. Look, thanks everyone.
Thanks for having us.
All right, thanks all. Bye.
Thanks everyone.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.